Imagine being on an island where your deepest, darkest secret is known. Every misdeed you thought was buried, every compromise you kind of rationalized follows you around all of the sudden, whispering, accusing, even punishing you. And now you're gonna be like, Paula, this is literally And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. It's a literal book. And to that I say yes. That's why I'm using this book to kind of show you something about psychology so we can all, live better. I'm not gonna lie, I'm here to recommend you the book also because it's literally brilliant. It left me speechless. I had never read such a thrilling book. But yeah, that's besides the point. Let's go back to Christie's Island, because it's not only a murder mystery. We can see it through like many different lenses, but I'm going to show you the psychological lens of it all. And of course I will not be able to just say everything and analyze everything because it's just so... it's a little novel. I cannot talk about every single line on the book. And also I'm a person, I'm biased. I will take the information of the book that I find the most triggering or the most easy to remember, and so I talk about those points. So yeah. Also, I'm gonna talk a bit about the characters. I'm not gonna spoil you the plot line or the mystery, but I am gonna roughly talk about the synopsis and a big idea of what's going on. So if you feel like this is a spoiler, goodbye, I'm sorry. But if this is not enough, because let me tell you, this is not enough. You could have told me 90% of the novel and still I would have read the book and be like, I had no idea this was gonna be this wild and plot twist over plot twist over plot twist. But yeah, it's a book that also dives into the psychology of guilt, and I really like this because I don't think lots of authors play with the psychology of guilt as much as Agatha Christie, especially in this novel. She has other novels, for instance, I've also read Murder in the Orient Express I don't know. And they also play with morality and justice. So justice and guilt are literally the pillars of this novel. And it's freaking amazing. Because once you realize that guilt is literally like a ghost following you, weighing you around in subtle ways that controls your whole life if you don't, kind of regulate it. It can even torment someone, even destroy people. And that's how this book plays perfectly and so freaking graciously with guilt. Today we are gonna learn how guilt operates, why it feels inaccessible sometimes, and what it can teach us about our own mind, using one of literature's most chilling and, dare I say, perfect mysteries. Hi, welcome back to our channel. It's Paula, and as a psychology student, I must admit, I read books as if they were a social experiment. So when I stumbled upon this book, Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, I came to the realization that this book is not only the most chilling and hooking book I've ever read, but also contains a secret vault filled with moral questions like what is justice and to what extent can all guilt take the driving seat of our lives. So let's dive into the eccentric yet common minds of our 10 protagonists and see how different people react to death, justice, and accusations in general. Who knows, maybe they showcase something we didn't know we had inside of us. Okay, so Christie decides to write 10 people and be like, okay, you're gonna be sent off to an island and be there. Okay, you're literally locked. It's a controlled psychological environment. The chilling thing about it all is that you don't know if there's some sort of big brother watching everything and kind of orchestrating everything, or is one of them. You're like, who the fuck is, who are they? And whilst you're reading it, you're thinking that the murderer is someone outside of the 10 people. But the 10 people are thinking that it can only be one of them. And it plays with your psychology as well, and that's why it's wild and amazing and wonderful, and I really love it. The only thing that was bugging me a bit is that the characters would someone would die and they'd be like, oh, someone's dead, well, what's for dinner? Tongue again, right? It's dude, I didn't know people were that of a psycho. What the fuck? Wouldn't someone dwell on the situation a bit more? I don't know. It's the only thing that I'm like, what the fuck is going on? But the book is brilliant. But anyway, the characters are removed from society. They are removed from any kind of like distraction and any kind of like their normal day-to-day life. They have no escape because the only way that they can go back to like land is by a vote, but like this vote never comes, and it's kind of also terrifying. So they are also put in this place where they are invited to think about their past, especially when they are accused of committing murders that cannot be proved as murders by the nature of what they did, which is wild. And it's in this isolated system that we can truly like understand the guilt and see how it unfolds in its purest form. Because we can see kind of like the way humans process their own wrongdoings when no one else can judge them, yet the inner mind becomes the judge. Like we see how some more than others, other protagonists, are kind of like spiraling and remember their past and feeling guilty, and not only like feeling guilty, but kind of like, and this actually happens early on, and for some characters even before getting into the island, they are already like overthinking their guilty thoughts. But what is guilt? We need to understand what guilt is so that we can, make a better analysis and also get to better conclusions. So first, guilt is one of the mind's most persistent kind of like forces. This is not like, this study says this. No, this is like me as a human being. Dare I say that guilt is one of the things that stops me from like being okay. Like the first thing that stops me from being okay is probably like guilt, and then it's followed by fear. But unlike fear, which is tied to an immediate danger, guilt lingers. It's not that harsh, immediate. It's more subtle. It lingers. It's insidious. Even kind of like relentless sometimes. And psychologists, philosophers, and experts, and just like people, like normal people around, describe guilt as this internal moral sign. It's kind of like a measure of how our actions align with our morals and our values, and how they like misalign with each other. That's when guilt appears, because you truly feel like you could have done better. And on the island, we see this to like the most exaggerated version we could, because we see how characters project, how they deny doing their wrongings. First of all, like everyone denies. Like almost everyone denies committing the crimes. When in reality, when we get to like some one-on-one conversations, or we get some really insightful internal monologues of the characters, we realize that, yeah, they are freaking guilty. They're just like pretending they're not. And even we see people trying to convince themselves that they are not guilty when, come on man, it's literally obvious. Those are classic patterns that we see in everyday life. Like we all do it. But we just are seeing these coping mechanisms to the extreme. Because you don't need to be in a murderous island to understand and acknowledge your missteps. And how those create like small pockets of like inner tension inside of you, and it's like you know that something's wrong, but maybe you cannot fully like pinpoint it because you've convinced yourself that I'm not guilty, but inside of you still feel you're guilty. It's because towards something you can feel, you can think, and you can act, okay? And if you acted in a way that makes you feel terrible, then you only have the thinking part, the cognitive part. Which one do you want to go? You want to go to kind of like rationalize your behavior so that at the end, and like when time passes, you can feel better about it. Because changing how you feel is really extremely hard. Changing how you think, but changing how you act, it's really freaking easy. The problem is when you make a mistake, chances are it's a behavioral mistake. So the things you can change, of course, the mistake, don't ever do it again. That's why kind of like guilt exists, to kind of like showcase you that, hey, this is freaking wrong. But your brain immediately goes to like, okay, let's rationalize this thing, and let's kind of like find a way so that I cannot feel as guilty towards what I already did, because I cannot change that. And instead of acknowledging it and learning from your mistake, you're rationalizing your mistake, not learning from it, to like in hopes that in, I don't know, an XY period of time you will feel better about it, and therefore not have a problem, because your three, like the behavioral, the cognitive, and the emotional parts of you towards what you did are fine and are aligned. Like, guys, I'm sure you can think about a moment in your life where you justified something that you shouldn't be justifying, but you just did because, hey, I acted terribly, I'm just gonna justify it. To me, it happens like when driving. One day I drove terribly and was like, it's because it's raining. It's like, dude, no, you just did it terribly because you were afraid of the rain, not because of the, like, it wasn't the rain, it was you towards the rain. But anyway, the problem is if you leave guilt unsolved, it grows, it whispers doubt into you, and it like becomes this spiral of madness that just like eats you alive. And that's what we see in the characters. It sabotages your life overall. That's why we need to work with guilt. Now, how guilt shapes behavior. This is something really interesting, because we see how the characters' behavior changes the longer they are experiencing this guilt. That is also being intensified as time goes. Because guilt doesn't just make us feel bad, it changes what we do. It can make us overcompensate to avoid judgment. It's kind of like over-explaining stuff when someone accuses you of something. We see it in the doctor. We see it in Vera. We see it in Lombard. We see it in every one of them. They are overcompensating. Some of them say it out loud, and some of them just keep it like inside their heads. But they are overcompensating. Some others just project blame onto others. Think of Emily Blunt. Oh no, it's not Emily Blunt. It's Emily Brand. I don't know why I said Emily Blunt. Well, I mean, yeah, it makes sense. But anyway, Emily Brand. We see it in Hair. How she projects the blame on the person she was somewhat responsible of her leaving this earth. Let's just put it this way. Then it can also like sabotage relationships out of shame and fear, which, I mean, if we take a look and we understand the circumstances that the characters were, in, it makes sense that they would like sabotage themselves because they don't truly trust themselves. And we see it in the alliances that are formed inside of the group, and how none of them like trust each other. That's more like the sabotage relationships could go more for like a normal person living a normal life, but they were not in a normal circumstance. Therefore, every single thing they would do or they would think, it's likely not going to be normal. On the island, this is like literal. Each guest reacts to the others as though their own guilt were contagious. In real life, guilt operates kind of like similarly, okay? You kind of like project the guilt onto others, because if you're feeling guilty, you're gonna be like, oh, because maybe the other person is also guilty, right? Because it literally shapes our interactions, let's be honest. How we feel and think affect the way we interact with the world. The brain is kind of a predictive machine, and in order to predict, you need to know. And what you feel and believe is information your brain takes in order to process reality. That's another reason why we need to manage guilt. It's so easy to be driven by guilt once it enters our like psyche. And we see it in the characters. Like once they, like the realization moment comes into their heads and they're like, fuck, I'm guilty. They start like spiraling. They don't even trust themselves. They don't even trust what they see, and they start acting out of guilt and fear, which I totally understand because people are getting murdered around them. Of course you're gonna be terrible. Well, add those to the mix. If you add the fear and the guilt and the uncertainty and the fact that you are who knows where with who knows who, it's the perfect mix to madness. And we see it. People turn mad and people Oh my god, the ending. The ending. It's really good. Guilt does not only play a role in how we act, but also in how we see ourselves and our identity. Because how we act, how we feel, and how we think plays on how we sense ourselves, on our identity. And it is quite interesting how most of the individuals on the island don't straight up admit that they indeed committed the crimes. And some of them even die without admitting their crimes. Every character arrives on the island with polished masks, okay? They're all like normal people that are respectable, they are calm, they're moral, they are normal. But once they are isolated and once they are kind of like guilt-tripped, boy, then they become mad. And that's when like reality hits and everything gets juicy and we realize that we're dealing with people who are more than flawed. They are extremely morally ambiguous and their guilt manifests as obsession, fear, paranoia, but their guilt is following them because they refuse to confront their guilt. They are fearing their guilt. And so it hits back like a boomerang on their faces, like, well, like a boomerang or like seaweed. Why is it that it feels like the characters are extremely like dumb? Because like just admit it. Once you admit it, you're gonna feel better. Why don't they admit it? Is it because they actually don't believe that what they did was murder? Or is it because they won't admit it because they don't want to shatter the moral and good image they portray of themselves? Their identity. Identity, as we know, is formed by crises, and if you want to know more about how to form your own identity and how actually struggling is a good sign, you will have the link in the pinned comment of the video I did on that. So yeah, that's a great moment to say, like, if you're liking this video, like it, and subscribe if you want to the channel, because I have like lots of things to say that are really interesting. And thank you. Okay, so what's the answer of their guilt? Maybe it's one, or maybe it's the other, or maybe it's a bit of both. I would dare to say that it depends on the person. For instance, we could take one of the women and one of the men. We can see that one of the women clearly thinks that she didn't do anything. And it's so freaking frustrating because it's like, you think you are so moral? I open a Bible and read it. Again. And then you have Lombard, for instance, that he literally straight up said, yeah, I fucking killed those bitches. It wasn't murder, but I just left them without food. By the way, I didn't spoil anything. It's in one of the first chapters. What we know is for sure that the murderer unalived them in order of accountability and kind of like suffering. Or at least what it deemed to be accountability under their eye, which is all subjective. Because if you ask me, I would have placed them in a different order. But then the story would be different and it's good the way it is. But anyway. Conclusion is we all have like kind of like hidden parts of ourselves that we don't want to accept because we think we are better than that. Well, maybe we're not. But there's things like resentment, envy, or moral compromises that we've done in our lives and we're not accepting them. And it's like, maybe you're feeling bad because you're not accepting it and you're not growing out of it. And that's when you get isolated in an island with people who are being unalived. It is key for you to develop a good relationship with guilt. How the hell do we do it? Well, it is not something that ought to be removed from our minds. Like, we could not live without guilt because then everyone would be so cruel to each other that we just could call it quit to humanity. But guilt should rather be seen as a sign that something inside of us is dissonant with what we would ideally have done. It is a sign to recognize our mistakes and learn from them, not to be like, oh, I'm feeling bad, but I'm not a bad person. Good people make mistakes. Everyone feels guilty. It's part of the human experience. And that's when Christie demonstrates a terrifying truth, that sometimes the harshest judgments comes from within. The killer is external, but the real punishment is psychological. And we see it with the last survivor so clearly because the last survivor, just think about it, there's only one person. How come that in the end, no one ends up alive? And then there were none. Well, it's psychological. It's because people are so driven by the guilt and the fear, and they just like spiral, and inside their heads they're like, okay, I'm the only one remaining. Maybe I should go with Hugo. The lesson is that guilt has power, not because of external punishment, because more often than not, when we feel guilty, we fear being judged by others, by our mistakes, when in reality, the only one who's thinking a lot about your own mistake is yourself. At least chances are we are not perpetually judged. Well, yes, we are by ourselves, and maybe we should kind of like rethink it and be a bit more neutral with ourselves and be just like, hey, yeah, you made a mistake, but that doesn't mean that you are a criminal. Or maybe you are, who knows? Maybe you should be sent off to a soldier island. Let me get into a tangent. There's this thing of the book, it has been edited because before it used to contain a racist kind of slur, and now they've changed the word to, like, they said it from a word to Indians to soldiers, and now it's soldiers, or at least the version I read is soldiers. It doesn't hit as hard because the first one and the second one, it's kind of like a mirror effect to what they say to Lombard. But I guess you need to read the book to understand my reference. I really like reading mystery. Please, if you have any like mystery books that hit as hard as this one, comment down below. Please, 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 I'm telling you now. I've read Murder in the Orient Express and it just doesn't hit as hard. It doesn't. Let's get to the conclusion. We can see the island as a mirror for the mind. We may not face murders in our day-to-day life, but we face all sorts of moral and emotional questions and reckonings, okay? Guilt is also inevitable, but it doesn't have to dominate us. Confronting our choices, acknowledging and accepting mistakes, whilst learning from them can prevent guilt from quietly controlling our lives. Which unacknowledged actions are shaping your mind? So which things are you feeling guilty about that could, like, if you didn't, your life would be better, or you would like have less stress overall? Please don't turn into someone that would go to this sort of place. Yeah. Because And Then There Were None is not only a book of death, it's a study of like conscience and guilt and an inescapable self. Christie's Island is fictional, but the psychological truths are freaking universal, and we see how judging oneself can literally end your life, and how justice is literally subjective, and to what extent people can acquire justice once they have power. And how guilt follows us quietly, shaping every move and thought. And how some people naturally are very anxious and guilt driven, and others are just like, I don't freaking care about it, man. It's awesome to see like different reactions out of different people in such weird ass circumstances. And also like the murders. It's really interesting to see like the mystery and go around like, I know better than you, Agatha. I think I found the truth. And then you realize that you're just dumb, and you would have died like one of the first people, because you would have like stumbled upon a rock and just tripped and fell and died. But yeah, the thing I want you to take out of this video is like, what are you carrying inside your head that you haven't faced? And if you did, your life would be better and you wouldn't be stuck in an island. Because our mind sometimes does feel like an isolated mansion where no one can truly escape from. And on that note, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more of my videos about books and psychology, I have here a playlist called Literary Psychology. And on that note, have a really nice week, and I'll see you in the next one. Mwah.